Welcome to the second podcast episode for the Berlin Life. I'm 𝗘𝗽𝗂, career coach and founder of the Berlin Life, where we help people move to Germany and find work. On our website, you can find guides to living and working in Germany, career coaching services, information about our community events, and more. So today, we're here to talk about CV photos and whether or not you should include them on a German CV. We're going to discuss the tradition of photos on German CVs, how times are finally changing for the better, I hope, potential downsides of adding a photo, whether or not omitting photos will hurt your chance of finding a job, and finally, just some basic photo requirements that will help you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Basically, what it is, it's a really classic question for foreigners navigating the German job market for the first time. Should I add a photo to my German CV? For some of us, like me, for example, it's a big culture shock, as adding a photo to your job application is like a big no-no back in our home countries. For example, in Canada, at least I can just speak from my personal experience, like you would never add a photo to your CV because it's just revealing too much personal information. And so for some people who are moving to Germany from elsewhere, it doesn't feel very natural, and it actually feels really uncomfortable at the idea of adding our CV photos. And in some cases, a lot of us are extremely reluctant to add one, and for very valid reasons, which we'll get into very shortly. So first, let's talk about a little bit of history. So in Germany, for a very, very long time now, including a photo on your CV was just a standard practice. It was something that everyone was expected to do. And employers liked it because it added a personal touch and it helped them picture you as a candidate. And so it was kind of you can think of it like as a visual introduction. And it was something that became a tradition that was really deeply rooted within the German workplace culture. But thankfully, times are changing. So with more of a focus on diversity and fairness, many companies are actually moving away from this requirement altogether. So I've talked with countless HR people, and a lot of them admit it's just such an outdated and unnecessary tradition. And so more modern, international, and progressive workplaces, startups, for example, they really often don't expect a photo. And also, in an effort to better candidate experience, a lot of companies are actually actively discouraging candidates from adding photos because they want to, as much as possible, to reduce potential bias during a hiring process. So if you're worried about whether or not a photo is mandatory, the answer is no. In most cases, it's entirely optional. So let's talk about the downside of adding a photo to your German CV. And obviously, as we just touched upon, it's bias. And this would be your biggest reason for not wanting to put a photo, because even the most well-meaning a person can have unconscious bias. So a photo can lead them to make assumptions about your age, gender, ethnicity, and even your personality and professional capabilities. So while these thoughts shouldn't influence hiring decisions, they sometimes do. So there's some really crazy biases out there aside from the ones we just mentioned, but there's kind of this attractiveness bias. So if a person is perceived as attractive in their photo or during job interviews, they are more likely to get hired over people who are perceived as less attractive, even though they're equally qualified. There's even crazy stats out there that taller men are often hired and paid more than shorter men. This is really, really crazy biases out there. So by leaving out a photo, you actually encourage the employer to focus on the things that really matters: your qualifications, your skills, experience, your aptitude, and more. So leaving out a photo can level the playing field, even if it's just a little bit. And especially in Germany at the moment, where anti-foreigner sentiment is increasing, and studies have shown that it's harder for foreigners to find jobs in Germany than Germans, and even that we're usually paid less. So I think wanting to leave out a photo is very, very fair. So this leads us to the next question. Could leaving out a photo actually hurt your chances of finding a job? In some cases, unfortunately, yes. So there's going to be some traditional workplaces in Germany that still expect a photo. And if you don't include one, they may wonder why. And for some of them, it could make your application stand out in a wrong way. So one of the tips that you can follow to overcome this is to do a little bit of research about the company itself to see if you can, detect a little bit more about their culture. So check them out on their website. What photos are they using? What do the people who are working there look like? What type of language are they using? Look at their LinkedIn profiles of employees, look at their job postings. If their tone and style seems more formal or traditional, it might be safer to include a photo. But if you're looking at a more modern, international, or innovative workplace, it's probably totally fine to leave it out. So as I mentioned, startups, they're probably not really going to care about a photo. But if you're looking at something like a big bank, a law firm, any government agency, for sure, then maybe it's a great idea to include a photo. And then, of course, you do have some professions, no matter where, not just in Germany, that absolutely require photos. So if you're in fashion, if you're an actor, of course, a photo will then be required. But what really troubles me about some thoughts I hear from German recruiters is when they say not adding a photo is lazy, or not adding a photo makes me suspicious of you because it makes me feel like you're trying to hide something. And so, yes, obviously someone could Google you and find some photos. Like if you're not that good at keeping yourself off the internet, that's going to happen. And of course, they're going to see your face when they meet you during a job interview. So of course, if they still want to follow their biases, it will happen. But it also doesn't mean that it's right. I personally, at least, don't think it's unreasonable for people to want to minimize potential bias. I feel like a German recruiter or hiring manager shouldn't come to the conclusion that I'm lazy because I didn't add a photo. Maybe I actually did it on purpose. And, they also think I can tell so much about you if I see your face. And it's I feel like that's a professional, it's a really unintelligent take. You can't just look at me and tell me how good of a career coach I am, or you can't look at somebody else and tell how good of a lawyer they are just based on how they look. So not taking a moment to understand that not everyone feels comfortable sharing a photo, I feel it lacks a lot of empathy and openness. And if someone is really, truly rooted in that rather shallow mindset, you probably don't want to work for them. At least I know I wouldn't. Anyway, all of that said, at the end of the day, adding a photo is totally your decision. You should go with what you feel most comfortable with and aligns with the type of workplace you want to join. And if you want to add a photo, just do it. Like Nike. That's my bad joke for this podcast. And yes, so what are some tips if you want to include a photo? So if you decide to include a photo, here's a few tips about how to do it right. If you have a budget, hire a professional photographer and get some photos that you really like, shows your personality, and just something that you're really happy with. And this could be especially important for people who are really interested in investing more in their personal branding. But also at the same time, don't feel any pressure. If you don't have the time and money to hire a professional photographer, most smartphones these days can take really, really good portrait photos. So this will also work. I've used them myself, and it seems to have been fine so far. Of course, that's just a very personal, anecdotal example, but I think they'll work. Definitely, for sure, just make it a headshot. It shouldn't be a full body shot. Avoid, those duck face selfies or photos with really distracting backgrounds. Also, dress appropriately for your industry. So maybe if you're looking for a more corporate job, you might want to have business attire. For other industries, a smart casual might also work a little bit better. And whatever you do, just look directly at the camera and smile. The goal is to look confident, approachable, and professional. And last but not least, make sure that the photo is appropriately sized for your CV. So it should be kind of just something that you put in the upper right hand left corner of your CV, and it should just be small so it doesn't overwhelm the page and take up that valuable real estate that we talked about in our episode last week. So typically a smaller photo in the upper corner is going to be what works best. I once received a job application from someone where their CV was several pages long and the first page was just their photo, and they were applying for a corporate job. It was a little bit much, and they were also looking thoughtfully out into the distance and not at the camera, like almost like, wow, I'm wondering if I'm going to get hired for the job with this photo. Of course, I'm just kidding, but it was a little bit much. So again, just do what you think is going to work for that particular company and that particular job application. So to sum up, final thoughts, including a photo on your German CV is optional. It is not mandatory. You can read lots of other sources that will say different things, but usually their arguments for that you absolutely have to have a photo are rather weak. And if you do add a photo, make sure it's professional and it's suited to your industry. And if you decide to leave one out, it's all good. And what really matters the most at the end of the day is that your CV highlights your skills, your experience, your potential, and your match to the job. So just focus on being yourself, and at some point you're going to find a job that works for you. So that's it. I'm now going to conclude. So thank you for tuning in. I hope the episode addressed any outstanding questions you may have had about the German CV photo topic. I also wrote a guide about German CV photos, which I'll link to in the podcast description. And one last request from me, very humble request. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe. So we're on Substack. And over the week, I added us to Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. And if you could also tell others, who are looking for work in Germany, tell them about us, send them the podcast, get them to subscribe as well. And yeah, again, thank you. I'm so honored and humbled by the fact people are listening. And I really do hope that will be some help. So join us next time for more tips on navigating life in Germany. And in the meantime, good luck with your job applications and take care.